Hello and welcome everyone to the business Q&A sessions with Meeta and Tosh. As always, Tosh and I are here to bring you the most current challenges that are out there facing our business community. And Tosh, it's great to be back here. You had a half-term hiatus. How are you doing?
Yeah, I was good, good to have a little breakaway with the kids and all the rest of it, that sort of thing. What about yourself?
Well, it's been a funny old time, really. We're busy, but it's a very challenging market. So
challenging is the right word, isn't it? Challenging for everybody in so many different ways. And
yeah.
I should start this by saying that this is a live Q&A session. It was designed to help you, our audience, to deal with current issues that you're really dealing with right now, with practical, not textbook advice. This is stuff that is grounded in real-world application, but we've got a bit of a technical issue today, so we haven't got any attendees today, right, Meeta? But obviously, if you're watching the replay.
Exactly. We couldn't get the attendees in the room, so we apologise for the technical hitch, but you should all be watching the recording now, and hopefully we will still impart good knowledge and expertise for you. And next week, we're back live at 11 a.m. on Thursday, as always. So... Gosh, I mean, Tosh, if last year the word was pandemic and furlough, this year the word is hybrid. If it's not hybrid working, it's hybrid cars. It's just everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what? It seems like there's a flip of the script. What we understand is the norm. I'm not going to use the new norm. I'm desperate not to use the new norm. But there's a flip of the script in every single way. Candidate employees now have a lot of power in what they can say and what they do and how things operate. And employers might have preferences, but the law doesn't necessarily allow those preferences to trump what the employee has to say in certain circumstances with hybrid working, which is, obviously part of what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Also, Meeta, I should point out, I'm standing up today, so if I'm a little bit dynamic, it might be because of that.
It's healthy to stand, so good on you. I've got a new soft squishy chair, so I'm making the most of it.
Before we get into our questions that in the for today's webinar, I know you love your stats, so I thought I'd do little stats. I thought I'd outstat you actually today. So let's see. So, did you know that 73% of workers are now wanting to work flexibly? 73.
Yeah.
And that remote working for job posting adverts, you definitely must know this, have increased 5 times during the pandemic for remote job postings.
Yeah.
So this has become, people understand now that they want to work anywhere. Not just anywhere in the country, it can be globally, across time zones, because you are literally not limited as long as you're prepared to work in meet the employer's requirements.
Yeah.
You can work abroad, outsourcing to other countries has been happening for forever.
Yeah.
Whether it's call centers or whatever else it is over in India or what have you, they're completely different time zone, but they're working for UK time zone, UK clients, right?
Yeah.
Over 40% of the global workforce is considering leaving their employers this year, and 46% are planning to move now so that they can work remotely, because we're not limited by time or space. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I thought those were very interesting stats. That's a shift of power, isn't it?
It is a shift of power on paper. The reality is that we know that there are more jobs advertised than ever. We know that a lot of them are in industrial, truck driving and things like that. However, as businesses are getting back into the working world, normal, whatever that normal is, we are finding that the demands on the ground are for people who can be in 4 days, sometimes 5. And I think it's really important for employers to look at the bigger picture, because I'm going to add to your stats and talk about the fact that Accenture found that of the highest growth companies, 63% were hybrid working. So it pays to have hybrid working. And of the most negative or no growth companies, 69% were working from the office. So I know that's a little bit backwards, but essentially what it's saying is hybrid improves the chances of you having a growth, successful organization, versus if you're going to have 5 days people back in the office, back to pre-pandemic style, then chances are that you are going to be a no growth or negative growth environment. So powerful. All those stats are so powerful. And as you said, it's not just the candidate power that's arisen. but it's also the fact that we have to stand up and look as employers. And like you always say to us, yes, have your objectives, have your strategy, but also realize that you need people to go there. So it's the balance, I suppose.
And the balance is the right word. I'm going to use that word I use every single week, which is about being reasonable.
Yeah.
Reasonable in the circumstances. That doesn't just mean to the employee, that also means in accordance with the needs of the business. Employees have got rights too. Yeah. So it's really just understanding that balance is the right word, Meeta.
Yeah.
So should we go through our 4 questions of today's webinar? And I think we're going to cover all of the things we've been talking about with a specific view to addressing those questions. So the first one, and I'm particularly interested in how you're doing things at the moment, because Meeta, my law firm now, with the pandemic, we got rid of the office, in fact. So all of my team are working remotely, but there's a lot of downsides to that. And I would expect them to come in when we get the office back up and running and all that sort of stuff as well, because there's lots of benefits to it, particularly for those who are training and perhaps need to shadow somebody in person. That's the issue, isn't it? The requirement for a presence. Is there really a requirement for a presence? So the first question is, how do you manage a hybrid workforce? How do you manage one?
So this is a really important area to consider, because I think it's fair to say that hybrid working, for all the statistics, for all what's going on out there, for all the movement of employment and availability of roles, hybrid is here to stay. I think we have to accept that. But what hybrid means for you is not what hybrid means for somebody else. So we are evolving. And one of the first things we've done in our hybrid management approach is to say that we are going to try structures. We're going to reflect. We're going to review. We're going to keep what works. We're going to let go of what doesn't. And we continue to try things that are going to ultimately help each individual and the business have the best outcomes. So that's the first thing. And that's why, management starts with leadership. It's redefining that purpose, so it's all very well saying you need to achieve this number of calls a day, or you need to have that admin done. But what about saying, look, as a team, we want to have these sales, we want to have this result on the customer experience, we want this result on employee engagement, and we want this number of bonuses going out. So 4 objectives that creates a purpose, and keep it short term because things are evolving. So it's important to try and move towards an environment of output rather than managing the day-to-day numbers, because you can't. So you've got to build that trust and confidence. And you asked me how we did it.
Yep.
I mean, it's still a work in progress. But one thing I've seen is that when there's clarity on what the role is, when there's clarity on what outputs are, and clarity on expectation of culture, behavior, and how we conduct ourselves, people rise to deliver because they're trusted, they're given a choice of where to work, they understand what needs to be done, whether they're at the office or at home. And when they asked to come in because we've got a team catch up or something like that, they're on board because they understand. So it's always the way, it's a give and take. But look, every organization has its targets, and we are not compromising on our targets, whether that's sales or customer experience, feedback, employee engagement. But what we are doing is making sure that we are looking at each role and its requirements individually. So for any organization out there, you are going to have to get each manager to look at each division's targets, objectives, and feedback.
And each role, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. So we have people that are fully remote or come in 1 day a week, right through to those that are doing 2 to 3. And we have some people who are supporting that team who are in 5 days. We tried hybrid. We did a review. It didn't necessarily work in the same way. So we said, right, let's try getting you in every day and see how that helps. Because yes, people want hybrid, but I think first and foremost, they want a career that they can feel secure and happy in. So it's important for employees to understand that balance as well.
So there's 2 things there you said, which is really important, which is one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
And you're definitely looking at it unique to the circumstances. But there's also, from a legal point of view, there's an obligation on employers to create effective systems of work.
Exactly.
And particularly in certain situations, that could lead to, from a lawyer's point of view, which is why I'm here, there could lead to discrimination claims, and we shouldn't make assumptions.
Yeah.
The way we're talking right now, Meeta, we're talking about people who want to be working hybrid and they want to be working from home. Actually, a lot of people want to be working in the office. Not everybody has their own workspace. Some are surrounded by noisy environments or noisy kids or whatever the circumstances are. We had a case for it recently where there was a disabled employee. And the people were encouraging everybody to come into work, but not the disabled employee, because they made the assumption it was easier for that disabled employee not to come into work. But the disabled employer wanted to come into work because their internet connection was better, they were surrounded by their work colleagues, the environment where they were at didn't really fit, and that resulted in a discrimination claim.
Yeah.
So because there's a failure to make reasonable adjustments, and it was all based on assumptions, which are good assumptions as far as the employer was concerned. They were doing it to look after the employee. Was the employer was like, hang on a minute, that's not what I don't want that.
Ask me questions, make no assumptions. Your employees are right there, have a conversation.
Yeah, it's really that. Be straight about it.
Yeah.
If they are resisting coming into work, that is the challenge you need to overcome. That's a slightly different topic that we're going to address in a moment, I imagine.
Indeed. So just to add to your point about people coming in and the challenges around, again, working from home, one of the new articles I read today was about reimbursement of working from home costs. Because on one hand, employees are no longer traveling, and there's been a whole debate around whether the employees that don't travel, are their salaries reduced because their costs are reduced. But likewise, employees are now looking at home working costs. So that's something to be mindful for as an employer. And the next topic about what to do when it goes wrong really shows that it can go wrong for so many reasons. I mean, it could be, and we'll talk about this afterwards, because we're going to talk about managing employee performance and employee well-being. But let's talk first about what to do when it goes wrong, Tosh. So what sort of scenarios would determine it going wrong? Poor performance?
So I've got a client right now, and they've got their sales team. Sales team feel that they've been working remotely quite well for however long, but the boss now wants them to come in. Why? Because what you just said, they've got targets to meet, and they know that the hub of working together will create a different dynamic that is going to increase their sales. When you're in that environment, you immerse yourself with those people doing those calls, operating in that way. It's not the same as sitting on your own unless you're used to working in that way. So these guys have been used to it. So what he did was he came to a compromise, and he said, okay, look, come in 3 days a week. And then you'll see the hub for those 2-3 days a week. And then if we can see how that improvement, then we can decide whether it's better that you stay at home or come in or do a hybrid version. And they saw the improvement in their performance as a result of being immersed with their colleagues who are doing the same thing. They learn differently. Just overhearing certain conversations, certain phrases, or certain strategies. When they're all having a group meeting, it's not like when you're on Teams and you're distracted by, I don't know, some drilling going outside or something. You're all there together, right? So how do you? So that it's a matter of not just thinking, oh, we've got to make it happen. There is, whilst there may not be a requirement for their presence, and we know there isn't a real requirement because we've been operating remotely all this time, but obviously it has a negative impact on the business, or it can do, and that is a requirement that needs to be addressed.
So that, reflecting on that, the most important word for me there was the proof. It was let's do it together, let's reflect, and let's find out. So for me, when things go wrong, maybe where the employer has one perspective and the employee has another, the employer says, I want you to come in, the employee says no, or the other way around, like this disabled employee case, or people just can't function to the maximum efficiency that the company requires. A lot of companies, as you said, you've let your office go. A lot of companies have actually downsized their office space. I heard about one company that they downsized their office space, and the money they saved, they gave in bonuses to all their people. Year one. Don't know if they're going to do it every year, but they did that in year one. And potentially a bit of a carrot to say, but that meant people can only come in half and half. So again, culture starts to get affected. People start to have misunderstandings. And so, we were talking about next week, we're doing a whole topic on grievances, aren't we? So we don't need to go into the detail of that. But what do employers do when it goes wrong?
Well, the first thing is to have a very grown-up conversation with them. Don't be afraid to have it, and be clear what your needs are, what their needs are, but always have the approach, if I was in your shoes. Try and see it from their point of view, understand why it is that what their objections are, and then how do we overcome those objections? What are the kinds of objections that I've seen come up recently? They're fearful of coming into the workplace. They don't know who's there, where that person has been, don't want to contract it. Just that by itself. There might be other situations where they've got their partner is pregnant, or the employee themselves are pregnant, and they just don't want to come in, and all those sorts of things. What else? They've been working this way so far. They don't want to travel. They don't see the need to come in. I've been working remotely this time for like a year now. Why do you need me to come in?
Yeah, or so-and-so does that, why can't I do that?
Yeah, precisely right. So how do you overcome those challenges? Well, the first thing is you need to be able to show what the business need is. So, and obviously that has got to be a priority, is number one.
Yeah.
The next thing is there reason for resisting reasonable or not? So, for example, if it's because somebody is saying, I'm fearful of contracting something or what have you, well, we all as employers have obligations to have systems in place and processes in place to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
It's got to be something that's reasonable, obviously. It's not going to be bulletproof by any means. But if you've complied with government guidelines, if you've done your checklist, if you've got your processes in place, and you can produce that to the employee, and the employee is still refusing to come in, it is no longer reasonable in the eyes of the law, and you would be entitled to dismiss them if that was the only thing in isolation.
Yeah.
But I'm always going to say, try and do it the other way around. If you can make it work remotely, let it work remotely. But if it's a real requirement that's affecting you, then don't. You don't have to.
And if, Tosh, as an employment lawyer, you're dealing with these scenarios all the time, if an employer has tried to have a reasonable conversation, if they have an agreed job description with outputs, which are have been clearly explained, or having the one-to-ones that, they're checking in, if all of that doesn't transpire to them, the employer and employee meeting all requirements, or the employee meeting all the requirements of the employer, at what stage do they engage with yourself? At what stage does somebody call you up and say, we need help here because this is going south fast?
So we help employers and employees. So if it was the employer calling me, it would be by the time when they're saying, well, this employee just isn't coming back to work, what do we do? Straight away, and then we get into that situation. Or what often happens is the employee will raise a complaint or a grievance. We'll get into that in next week's topic. But when they raise the grievance, then they'll come to me to say, look, we've got this grievance from the employee coming back to work. What do we do?
Yeah.
The flip side of the coin is the employee saying that the employer is being unreasonable.
Yeah.
They won't let me work from home, or these are the reasons and so forth. And it isn't just a case of, oh right, you're absolutely right, that's unreasonable. We've got to find out what the story is. Why is the employer saying no? That in one set of circumstances where they're saying no, it will be reasonable, another one it won't be. So the right time is as soon as there's an impasse, or you can see a challenging situation arising, that is the right time to get in touch with somebody like me.
That's really important to know, that you don't have to muddle through, but that there are support and help. And Tosh is actually giving a free 30-minute session to all of our network at the moment, which we'll send out to you, because people just want to bounce questions off, don't they? That's why we do the webinar, but you're also doing that on a one-to-one basis now. Yeah,
absolutely right. And the idea is, a lot of people from the MTS audience have called us as well. And then you've got situations that are fact specific. So, the reason we're doing this is to be able to have access to experts that can guide you through whatever issues you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But it's just not as bad as it might seem. It's just understanding an explanation. If the employee is not going to comply with it after you've explained the what, why, and how, why don't you pick up the phone and speak to us?
Indeed. And, before we go on to the next topic about managing employee performance, I think what we've also got to do is look at the flip side of how badly things can go wrong. Double vaccinations are a big issue at the moment. People coming in, when they're coming in, timeliness, engagement, because often people come in and meet after a long time, and they can either be a really, great environment where everyone's chatting and not working, or they're working and not chatting, where things have shifted. So I think, we've got to make sure that we leave nothing to chance. So plan everything, plan your COVID policy, your COVID safe policy, plan the hybrid working, plan the checkpoints, and again, reflect back the job descriptions, everything, have good structures in place. And Tosh is there for just bouncing off, or when things go
absolutely.
And that
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, those then become the standard grievances, disciplinaries, unfair dismissal, all the usual employee lawsuits that arise when they feel that they haven't been treated right.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the other key things that I've noticed as a pattern is that the employees that raise a grievance, effectively, because they've been working remotely, effectively feel a little bit like second-class citizens. They're the ones that are not coming into work. You guys are in a hub. You're all kind of chatting to each other and finding out what's going on, and as close to how it used to be as it was. Whereas these guys are like on the outside of a circle a little bit. And guess what? People become disgruntled. And then that's how it starts to bubble up, and then there's a complaint. So just open your eyes, have some awareness, and try and nip it in the bud. It doesn't need to escalate to a point where somebody's feeling so angry that they feel they need to go and talk to somebody like me about it. We should be able to resolve these things internally.
Yeah, during the lockdown, lots of organisations really upped their rate of employee engagement surveys. Just 2 questions in the morning, taking the temperature of the room, everything's anonymous.
Yeah.
That. Keep it going. I know, again, it's something I'm saying, and I'm thinking it's probably been too long since we've done one. So try to make it routine.
Yeah, exactly right. What do you do, for example, to keep in touch with your team, Meeta?
So the managers have one-to-one with each individual in the week. They then have a group meeting once a week, and in between, everyone's on Teams or emails. So it means that we try to make it as much like sitting next to each other as possible.
Yeah, precisely what we do.
It's not going to be, but it's about understanding that geography shouldn't change the urgency and engagement with which you work.
Yeah, totally right. We've got the same sort of system. We've all got Teams open. It's not to be a big brother. Yeah. It's just the camera's always open, so you can see when you're at your desk. Just like if you pass through a phone call.
We don't have cameras. You have cameras, so you can see.
Yeah, we've got cameras, so they can see me. And obviously, they might turn it off if they're off to do, take a phone call, for example. They don't want to be interrupted or distracted or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just that feeling that you're not alone. You don't feel like you've not seen them. One of the recruits we've got, Meeta, is actually through yourself, as you know. I've never met the lady. Not in person.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I bet she's taller than me as well. That's cool. I'm vertically challenged. It's like a disability. So it's going to be, that'll be interesting, when we actually meet and catch up and do those sorts of things. But just like anything's possible now. So it's about figuring out how it can work. And if the answer is it can't because it's to the detriment of the company, well, then that's not being reasonable. The law doesn't say do anything possible to make it work for the employee. It says make it reasonable. In the context, that means your targets, making money, because you know what? The ship goes down, everything goes down.
Exactly. So that brings us to the next point, which is all about how to manage employee performance. And I think that's probably well tied in with then ensuring that employees' well-being remains a priority, because ultimately what I would say is the most important thing is clarity. Trust and confidence is built through saying what you're going to do and then doing it. And if you consistently do that in an environment, then the trust and confidence builds where people believe in the predictability and therefore can start to focus on the actual work rather than what's going to happen here and what's going to happen there.
Integrity is another word, isn't it?
Say that again?
Integrity is another word.
Exactly. It's all of the things that ultimately an employee feels that they're on the same side as the employer, not 2 people sitting across from each other in a debate or an argument. So first and foremost, I think it's really important that everyone look at their job description for each employee. The best time to start using job descriptions as a management tool was when the employee joined. The second best time is now. But before you just whip it out and start using it, you've got to make sure it's fit for purpose. Put an addendum to it, talking about competencies that are important. Put an addendum on outputs that are going to be measured. Agree them with the employee. Ask them, what do you think is important in your role? The beauty of good management is your employees know everything. All you need to do is ask the question, take notes, reflect, put it together, and then you both agree to commit to making sure you get there. You by supporting them, them by doing it. And then after that, it's about consistency. Again, if you've agreed to do a one-to-one every other week, do it every other week. But we had an example today where myself and my head of recruitment, Faye, we're supposed to have a 2 p.m. And I know for a fact that we've got somebody who's taken last-minute holiday due to wanting to have a bit of me time. They had a lot of, mental strain because it was very stressful. And we did a last-minute holiday, which we thought was important. So we've agreed to push that meeting back. But it is a case of, would you like the time back on the ground because it's busy? And shall we put another time in to ensure that nothing is missed? Alternatively, if you'd still like it, I'm here. And again, what that means is that to start with, it's really important to keep that regularity here and there. Then you can start to look at what's going on the ground, but never let it go, because those are the points in your diary that you've made time for your employee.
Yeah.
That's when they feel that they've got that importance and value to you. And that's not the only way, but it is a good checkpoint to have as a tool.
I think whether it's remote or whether it's in person, the principles of performance management remain the same. And one of the biggest, that's a large glass of vodka you've got there. It's a bit early in the day for that.
Well.
I think the principles of dealing with poor performance will remain the same whether you do it remotely or in person, or in attendance. with the employee. The issue that I have is what I have seen people overlook over the course of time. They keep saying what is wrong. They don't say how the person should necessarily overcome it. Right, you've not done this. We expect you to do those things. Blah, blah, talk about how we expect you to do it. See what other people are doing that are successful. So really educate them what it is. That's what a real appraisal actually is. I'm not just saying you've not succeeded in this or you've succeeded in that. Let's learn how those things were done. And here's another element that's often missed is why. And that might seem like an odd question to ask when you're talking about your work. Why do I need to work? Well, to keep my job? Well, no, actually, if you're part of a bigger machine, or if you're part of a bigger vision or mission, that is our why. So once you get people intrinsically hooked on what you're trying to do as a company, and yes, we're trying to make money, but that isn't the focus. The focus is whatever your mission is, and money follows that mission, or money follows the value, if you know what I mean. So understanding that difference. People, who those people are in business, the ones that just follow the money, and you feel it from the way that they talk, the way that they operate. So when they're really getting the value in there. So again, if we can focus doing the performance management, whether it's through teams or whether it's in person, what is the problem? How do we overcome? What is the expectation? There might be 20 phone calls to create 5 appointments to do a conversion rate of X or whatever it is, right? That sort of detail, because presumably somebody else is doing it well.
Yeah. And you don't need to have every output measured every time. You can pick a couple that you both agree are the key ones, or that need a bit more focus or attention. And, I think if you get that right, then the mental well-being of your employee will naturally become part of that one-to-one conversation or touch-based conversation. But what I would add to this is technology. I mean, hybrid working wouldn't be possible without technology, right? And technology is key as part of the setup. So I know for a fact that, Office 365 could probably send someone to the moon. I mean, 5 times over, I don't know. It's ridiculously fantastic. And yet many of us don't use it to its full capacity. There is something for everything. And I'm not plugging Microsoft. I'm just saying, because that's what we use. And I know.
No, you're right. What I've learned from this process is if you can think it, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that again like some sort of site, let's go time traveling. One day, let's see. But I guess what I'm saying is we were forced to reconsider and realign exactly how we were going to operate. How can we mirror these things? How do we change things? How do we adapt? What can we do the same? What's different? And technology has allowed all of those things. You could be talking to anybody anywhere in the world and not have a clue where they are or what they're doing exactly at that time, right? Me sitting as a solicitor with my suit and my half moon glasses, I never owned a pair. The traditional, with the chain and the glasses and all the rest of it, that's all gone. I could be sitting here in my Bermuda shorts and flip-flops for the client's care. Not that they need to see those things, but the point is, it's all about delivery.
Indeed. And for the mental well-being of each individual, which ultimately feeds into engagement, which feeds into productivity, which feeds into success all round, it's really important to think about how technology, especially, with people who might be more hybrid than others, can be utilized. So even though you have your team meetings, still try and have, on occasion, no one's going to have as many Zoom parties as they used to in lockdown, but maybe once a month, once a quarter. We did a really lovely thing where we sent all of our afternoon tea, and we just sat there, talked and had our afternoon, and it was more like, oh, look at this, oh, look at that. You'll do things face to face, but also you might do things that are hybrid when you're thinking about team events.
Yes.
The thing is, use things like Calm or Headspace apps. Give your employees, it's really cost effective, but it's taking really good tools. And sorry, there's a bit of feedback there. And then
the motorbike driving by.
Oh, right, okay. And then with these sort of apps, what I find really useful is start from the top. Management should also use the apps, because we have conversations like, yeah, I hear you, I use this. And then the peers start telling each other about sleep stories they've heard or meditations they've used. And before you know it, mental well-being, mindfulness, all the things that keep us balanced become part of the normal conversation. And all of a sudden, you've made it equally important in the agenda, which it needs to be.
I know what you've done is you've given all of your staff a Headspace app, right? As an example.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah.
And it's great. Anybody that's used it, I use it. Yeah. My staff got it as well. Same thing. Yeah. They've also got Audible. Listening books, just things that would just, get you in a certain state of mindset, take a balcony view before you get stuck into the do, every single day.
And I think it's really important to be quite black and white and say, look, for your mental well-being, this is what we're focusing on this month. So you could have a themed month. It doesn't have to be every month, but it could be, you know, just like you have business targets, you have some well-being targets. Do a survey. How are you out of 10? If it was a 7 last month, we want to bring it up to a 9. We really want to get it to a 10, but step 1 to 9, this is what we're going to give everyone, and we're going to check back in with you. So again, if people understand that they may be challenged and, you know, driven on a performance side, but equally we will challenge and drive them on their safeness and well-being. And that's what I say to my employees is, I'm here to support the holistic you know, your career.
You know, if one of your people are not performing, Meeta, I'd like to take your view on it. I don't think, why the hell is that not happening? I think, what's going on with that person? What's happening there? Why is that happening? And then we talk to that person to figure out where it's going wrong. Yeah. And then if that person has the right attitude and it's all work, but something isn't working, you do your best to fix it. Yeah. Generally speaking, I don't think poor performance is going to be people are taking the mickey, or people are just not, you know, or sitting there twiddling their thumbs, or they're on Facebook or whatever, or TikTok. You know, I don't think it's that. I think people do want to work, and I think they do work hard, but they just want that helping hand, that guidance,
there's a barrier,
that reassurance.
Yeah, and there's a barrier that can be overcome if everyone remembers they're on the same team, all pushing forward to that why together. So,
Meeta, I think we did our first live webinar without an audience, which is a shame. I wanted some questions there, but look, that doesn't mean you can't take it offline. You know, we are accessible. I always say this every single week. You know, we're not sitting in some ivory tower. Pick up the phone. Guess what? We'll pick it up and we'll answer. Yeah. And any questions on this topic or any challenges you're facing in the workplace, right?
Indeed. And technical issues being resolved. We will be back live next Thursday at 11 a.m. Thank you all. We hope you enjoyed the webinar this week. Thanks, Tosh, and see you next week.
See you next week. Bye, Meeta.
Bye, Tosh.